My name is Gabor Biro. I'm an expert of the economic theory of Michael Polanyi with the Routledge monograph and several research articles. You probably already know Michael Polanyi's concepts of tacit knowledge and spontaneous order. But did you know that he was the first to develop an economics film? Today I'm going to tell you the fascinating story of this film. Here's how I'm going to do it. First, I'm going to give you a short introduction about how Polanyi approached economics. Then, show you what social problem he sought to solve with his economics film and how he imagined to solve the problem. Next, I'm going to present the content and form of the film. After that, discuss the feedback he received to his film and the remake he developed as a response to this feedback. Finally, I'm going to offer some takeaway explaining the outcome of Polanyi's film project. By growing up, one of the most significant influences on Polanyi was his mother Cecile's intellectual saloon. Then Cecile's saloon, as her friends usually called it, became the focal point of underground progressivism in Budapest, attracting socialists and liberals alike. Participants ranged from György Lukács, the Marxist philosopher, to Oskar Jászai, the liberal politician. Cecile Mama was impressed by socialism and even organized events and lectures promoting the workers' movement. However, she was not simply a partisan for socialism. Her organizing work should rather be seen as providing a social space where a diverse array of socially sensitive intellectuals could share and discuss their progressive ideas. The young Polanyis grew up in this stimulating intellectual milieu. The most recent theories, philosophies, and ideologies were directly available in their living room. The Polanyi household was the antithesis of what in these days of COVID-19 we call social distancing. Not surprisingly, the Polanyi siblings have all emphasized the power of social factors in their later writings. Michael developed a humane liberalism, Carl a democratic socialism, and Laura a feminist philosophy. Michael's interest in the economy increased in the 1920s. While being employed at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, he regularly attended an informal economics discussion group with fellow Martians John von Neumann, Eugene Wigner, and Leo Szilard. Here, he met Tony and Gustav Stolper, a German economic journalist couple who became influential for Polanyi's socialization as an economist. The name Stolper might ring some bell to economists because of the Stolper-Samuelson box. This was partly developed by Wolfgang Stolper, the eldest son of this couple. Polanyi had started to take economics seriously by the early 1930s. He began to write regularly about economic issues and, by the 1940s, the loosely attached strands of his economic thought had started to converge, leading to more systematized accounts. In this presentation, we will take a closer look at one of these accounts, his economics film project. Polanyi was busy writing, but he was also busy shaking hands. He participated in two very significant liberal conferences in his period, the Walter Lippmann Colloquium in 1938 and the inaugural meeting of the Montpellerian Society in 1947. The Lippmann Colloquium was focused around Lippmann's book, The Good Society, which articulated important liberal ideas for addressing the problems of modern society. The Montpellerian Society's inaugural meeting in 1947 was an important post-war gathering of liberal thinkers interested in reinstituting liberal economic policies. What is perhaps not known about Michael Polanyi is that, as you can see in the bottom picture, he was the first signatory and therefore the first founding father of the Montpellerian Society. Polanyi's interest in economics and liberalism ran together. His film project he succinctly summarized as democracy by enlightenment through the film. is a great example of how these two interests were connected in his thought. Let's see first what problem he perceived, and then how he imagined to solve the problem with his film. In a nutshell, the problem was threefold: lack of knowledge, bad knowledge, and over-politicized knowledge. Let's start with lack of knowledge. According to Polanyi, some economic problems are too complex for lay people to understand. By looking outside the window, we cannot see an inflation going into the coffee shop or a budget deficit taking a bus. The meaning of invisible things is blurred, which leads to perplexity. Polanyi referred to one of Pavlov's experiments in which he established neurosis in a dog by gradually making two symbols, which to the dog signify two quite different things, very similar to each other. Once the symbols were similar enough to each other, the dog could not distinguish between them anymore. It did not know how to respond to the symbols and became neurotic. Polanyi argued that it's the same situation with lay people and the economy. What is needed is a new visual regime that makes the details visible and therefore comprehensible. But the problem is not just the lack of knowledge, it is also bad knowledge. Polanyi discussed popular fallacies, misconceptions, and delusions, and noted that economists are, at least, partly responsible for this situation. They should be more concerned about writing in a language that is comprehensible for lay people. Some knowledge is missing, some knowledge is bad, and some knowledge is designed to serve political purposes. Polanyi realized that people have a need to know how their everyday actions fit into a larger scheme, for example, how their efforts to earn money contribute to the operation of the economy as a whole. He also realized that the success of communist propaganda is best explained by developing a rat spirit, kind of social consciousness, which responded to this need. While Polanyi did not mention them per se, the German Geist theories were doing the same thing, offering an interpretation of how the individual microcosm is connected with the social macrocosm. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany played on these feelings, which led to terrible consequences, both on an individual and on a social level. So missing bad and over-politicized knowledge is the problem. What is the solution? Polanyi reported that the public understanding of economics was in a bad shape, as if economists were carrying the chessboard of economics in their heads without having the slightest inclination to talk to lay people about what is happening in the economy and why it happens. Polanyi advised to change this attitude. He urged economists to talk to people, not for their own sake, but for the betterment of society. For an enlightenment, one needs enlighteners, and for an economics enlightenment, Polanyi believed one needs economists. Economists should leave the ivory tower of academia for at least three purposes then: to ease the perplexity of lay people about economic issues, to counter popular fallacies and misconceptions, and to fight against propaganda. The Soviets and the Nazis were busy spreading propaganda, so there was no time to waste. Polanyi proposed to develop a kind of liberal social consciousness that would satisfy the people's need for social consciousness without making them subordinates of a non-democratic ideology. He was not only proposing such a program, but jumped right into the realization with his film project, from which he hoped to enlighten people and to keep down propagandistic nonsense. The first version of his film premiered in 1938 as an outline of the working of money. The second version in 1940 as unemployment and money, the principles involved. Polanyi emphasized several times that his film portrays Keynesian economics. The central message of the film was that money circulates through the economy. Polanyi called this circulation the money circle. It also shows how an additional amount of money in the form of investments creates multiplicative effects boosting the economy. When there is an economic downturn, it is the responsibility of the state to give this financial stimulus. So far, this sounds very Keynesian, but Polanyi did not promote infrastructural investments and public works as forms of this financial stimulus. He only promoted tax remissions and budget deficit. This does not sound very Keynesian. Polanyi called this commitment to the forms of tax remissions and budget deficit as following a principle of neutrality. It is neutral in the sense that it does not favor any group of people at the expense of others. The policy affects the whole economy and everyone involved. Without discretionary decisions, there is no place for corruption. The nature of the economic policy itself fosters integrity and liberty. According to most economists, economics is all about numbers. Polanyi thought otherwise. He barely mentioned numbers in his film. The main focus was on portraying how and why money goes from one place to another in the economy. For this purpose, using relative terms, for example, portraying larger or smaller money belts, worked better for him than using absolute terms. Unemployment and Money was a diagrammatic film, primarily used diagrams to tell the story. While some of the copies had an audio track, the sound was designed not to draw attention from the moving, shrinking, and expanding diagrams. One of his reviewers sharply criticized the film for presenting abstract diagrams instead of concrete, vivid, and realistic pictures. The reviewer missed the documentary view. 2 months later, Polanyi answered to this reviewer in the same journal. His answer makes it clear why he chose this form for his audiovisual project. Polanyi argued that the main documentary view of the economy is a technocratic view, that is, a view focusing on the results of economic activity in total. He did not want to provide his viewers a technocratic, but a commercial view, that is, a view focusing on the processes of economic activity in total. He wanted to show what otherwise cannot be seen. He wanted to show the big picture. He also noted that while diagrams guide the reason, photographs appeal to the senses. Since his aim was to convince and not to persuade his audience, he chose diagrams. The visual style of the film was cartoonish, very similar to that of contemporary cartoons. Of course, this was the golden age of cartoon animations. Disney was a superstar and represented technological innovation. Governments were experimenting with similar themes to disseminate knowledge and, yes, to spread propaganda. Polanyi's film premiered during World War II, and sometimes this led to strange comments. After watching the film, Barbara Hammond, famous British social historian, one of the authors of Labour trilogy, commented on the film in the following way. A nice little film with little Nazi figures trotting about seems wanted. She referred to the figure on the bottom picture. Of course, this figure had nothing to do with Nazis. It was a businessman pointing towards the profit margin and not a soldier making a Nazi salute. This brief comment shows that even gestures were highly politicized and one had to be very careful not to be misunderstood by his peers. The initial reception of the film was rather favorable. There were at least 10 press releases in the 2 years after the premiere of the first version of the film. Most reviewers praised the novelty of the film. One of them called it the art of a new Walt Disney. But economists did not like the film very much. Most of them criticized it for oversimplifying complex economic discourses, and another frequent criticism was that it was boring. So if you find my presentation boring as well, that's just being authentic. In cooperation with the Workers' Educational Association, Polanyi got his film tested by a at least 9 tutors in various schools between 1941 and 1942. Experience from these test screenings showed that neither the schools nor the tutors were completely prepared for the use of educational films. One tutor noted that it took 45 minutes for the technician to get a properly focused picture on the screen. Another indicated that there was no screen at all in his school, so they needed to improvise one. However, the most crucial critiques were not related to technical applicability, but to pedagogical applicability. One of the tutors claimed that the audio track of the film forced her to be silent during her own class. She felt deprived of the freedom to teach what and how she pleased. Some tutors complained that the narrative of the film made traditional blackboard work unnecessary. Another complained that the film made it necessary to do even more blackboard work than before because tutors needed to explain what was happening on the screen. Most tutors simply did not know what to do with the film. They did not know how to make it fit in the given syllabus and to the usual verbal narrative. Polanyi's movie left the projection room and entered the classroom. Its perception changed. From a hopeful novelty, it became an impractical curiosity. A couple of years after the premiere of the second version, it was clear that the impact of the film was far from meeting Polanyi's expectations. He realized that he needed to change the medium if he still wanted to convey his important message. So Polanyi transformed the film into a textbook that was published as Full Employment and Free Trade by Cambridge University Press in 1945. He really hoped that the book would reopen discussions of his film. He was trying very hard to bind these two projects together. Polanyi mentioned the film at the beginning of his book, but he was doing much, much more. The central narrative of the book was the same as that of the film. And it was not just the economic content. The visual style of the illustrations of the book was very similar to the visual style of the film. Polanyi even hired the same artist, Reginald Jeffreys, to make the illustrations. The top pictures show the circulation of money between the 4 sectors of the economy in the film and in the book, respectively. The pictures at the bottom show circulation in depression, full employment, and inflation in the film and in the book. They look very similar. While both the style and the content were very similar, there were a few differences. In the book, Polanyi had more space to reflect on the social context and to explain why rival proposals do not work. He addressed the Soviet experiment, the beverage plant, and a couple of other proposals. He also noted that capitalism and Keynesian policies can be made to conform to any standards of social justice. There is always already social agreement about what is the acceptable level of unemployment, about which unemployment inflation pairing is the best for society. Polanyi was an outsider to economics. He never got a degree in economics and never became a professor of economics. He was a chemist. He was led to economics by his social concerns. This did not stop him from calling for a radical change of the discipline. He knew he needed powerful allies if he was to realize his agenda. He has written to Keynes a couple of times to ask for his support for his noble quest, but John Maynard was too busy for taking care of his follower. Polanyi then asked help from John Hicks, another prominent economist, who also refused to give the much-needed authoritative backing. Polanyi asked him to write a preface to Full Employment and Free Trade. Eventually, Gottfried Haberler wrote a short foreword to the book. Talking about economics was increasingly politicized during the war. When the Soviet Union became an ally against Nazi Germany, talking about the weaknesses of economic planning became a taboo. Polanyi and Archibald Vivian Hill, he was the secretary of the Royal Society and Keynes' brother-in-law, were both devastated by how the Soviet terror found a ring of hush-hushers in the West. And it was not just about economics. Cases like the Soviet abduction of Fyodor Kapitsa were swept under the carpet of political games. Polanyi's film was no doubt an instance of technology push. The emergence of the new film technology led Polanyi to develop a new product, an educational film about economics. He hoped that once the film is out there, people would use it and spread the word about it, boosting sales and conveying his important social message. Polanyi really did not pay much attention to the market which his product was entering. He should have. There was no market pull, no expressed need which his product could satisfy. Universities, schools, and tutors were not really interested yet in using educational films on a regular basis. Most schools did not have projecting devices, and most tutors lacked the pedagogical skills to use a film during the regular classes. This perhaps explains why the film failed to revolutionize the public understanding of economics and why the story of the first economics film has long forgotten in the history of economic thought. Thank you very much for your attention.